This is exciting. I have my own show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first inaugural episode of Saturdays Sound Better. I'm Nathan Donnelly. Behind the camera right there, Austin Townley. You may recognize him, that name, from Above the Rim. You may recognize this room. This is the same room from Above the Rim. We're in the Courtside Club, the basement of the Riley Center, I believe. So this is my college football podcast. I also appear on Afterthought Sports. I was just on episode 2. Go check it out if you have not. It's on our YouTube. A lot of crazy stuff happened last college football season. We crowned a champion, our first champion from the 12-team format. That was the Ohio State Buckeyes. And I thought the 12-team format was good in some ways, and in other ways it kind of wasn't, and I'm going to kind of get into that later. But first, I want to talk about some surprising teams from last year and some disappointing teams that I thought were each, in my opinion. Number one, Indiana. Indiana was insane. They outperformed every projection. They outperformed every expectation. They were 11-2, 8-1 in the Big Ten. They beat both Michigan and Washington, who were both in the national title game last year. They had a plus 15 in the turnover ratio. Again, like I said, they dominated almost every single game. Coach Curt Cignetti had those boys rolling. They rolled right into Ohio State. That did not go too well. I'll get to that in a minute. And number two most surprising team to me was Arizona State. They went 11-3, 7-2 in the Big 12. They had those boys, Sam Leavitt and Cam Skattebo. And what really surprised me was kind of their toughness and fight when everybody counted them out in the Texas game. The Texas game was difficult for them. They were down big early, but they were able to fight back, especially with Cam Skattebo. And I just think they performed really, really well throughout the entire season when I personally was not looking at them in the preseason at all. And then we're going to get into some disappointing teams. Number one, Indiana. I just said they were surprising. Nathan, you just said they were surprising. They also disappointed me because Curt was talking a lot. Curt Cignetti was talking a lot before the Ohio State game and before the college football playoff. They went into Ohio State and they did not meet expectations. They did not rise up to his level of talking smack before the game. And that did not happen against Notre Dame in round 1 of the CFP either. And just to say, I think either Indiana or Notre Dame could have beat Georgia in round 2. I really think so. Georgia did not impress me either, but we won't even get into them. Number 2 most disappointing team, the Florida State Seminoles. The Florida State Seminoles were only 2 years removed from the Jordan Travis era. They ended last season, the season before, as the 5th ranked team, although they got blown out 63-3 in their bowl game without Jordan Travis. He got hurt at the end of the year. They did not meet up the expectations this year at all. They went 6-7 and 2-6 in the ACC. They had a lot of hype coming in, and they just did not meet up to it. And then number 3 for me, and you may doubt me or think, no, they performed well. The Ole Miss Rebels did not meet up to my expectations or Lane Kiffin's expectations either. They went 10-3, 5-3 in the SEC, and even at the end of the year, Lane Kiffin is saying, oh, we should totally be in the CFP. Like, we have the resume for it, we have the skill for it, we have an amazing quarterback, we have an amazing defense, which I don't agree with the defense, but we have an amazing quarterback, our offense is off the walls. Yes, you had 10 wins, and you heavily invested into your NIL transfers because you knew this 12-team playoff was coming up and you wanted to make this playoff. And you still didn't. You lost to Kentucky at home. How do you lose to Kentucky at home and then later in the year say, oh, we should totally make this CFP, this 12-team college football playoff? You don't deserve to if you lose to Kentucky at home. That was really icing on the cake for me. They completely underperformed in that sense. The rest of I believe Jackson Dart had over 500 yards, 6 touchdowns against Arkansas. Like, He put up historic numbers for the school. But if you lose to Kentucky at home, I don't think you have a case to make the CFP, to me anyway. And speaking of the CFP, the seeding is all messed up. Arizona State and Boise State should not get first round buys. In no way should they get first round buys. They are not the best teams. So we need to fix the seeding if we're going to keep 12 teams. If we're not going to keep 12 teams, we should go to 16. All I want as a result of this CFP is to get the best 4 teams in the semifinals. And this year, I think we totally got it. And with football is a little different than basketball. Basketball, the NCAA tournament is so glorified because there's upsets. There's 16 versus 1 upsets. There's been 2 of them ever. There's all these crazy upsets where in football, you're not necessarily going to get it unless the other team is truly better than you. So in a 16-team college football playoff, I truly think the best 4 teams and the best 2 teams will be in the semi and national champions. Yes, so the format should either be, I think, 12 teams is fine, but the seeding needs to be fixed. But the format should either be 8 teams or it should be 16 teams. I am interested to see about the upsets because the more games, the more prone we are to upsets. But I really don't. I really think that will even itself out. The college basketball is so glorified. They have the upsets. They have the NCAA tournament. The last team standing in the final in the college football playoff semifinals, I believe, will be the best teams. And that best team this year was the Ohio State Buckeyes. Throughout the year, personally, I was doubting them. I did not believe in Ryan Day. His track record against teams not named Michigan is phenomenal, but that leads me to believe in a big game against, first of all, Michigan, but also in a big game like the college football playoff, he won't be able to get it done. But he did. And he got a massive extension because of it. He got a 7-year, $12.5 million in base salary plus incentives per year. He's now at the top threshold. He joined Dabo Swinney and Kirby Smart as the highest paid coaches in college football. And so his employment roller coaster this year was kind of the whole story of Ohio State. They're riding high early in the year. They're beating teams by 60, which is justified. That should happen. They have an amazing they have one of the most expensive rosters in the nation. But when it comes down to it, in a big game like Michigan, you, Chip Kelly, and to an extent, Will Howard, fold. You fold. You completely crumble under the pressure in Ann Arbor. And that to me, or I'm sorry, it was not in Ann Arbor, it was in Ohio State. But still, you fold in your own stadium. That to me spells disaster. It spells, and I go on Twitter immediately after the game, Ryan Day should not have a job by tomorrow morning. And to an extent, I agreed with that. Because he has repeatedly lost to Michigan over and over and over again. But let's get back to the team of Ohio State. They had absolute animals. In 2 years, or whenever Jeremiah Smith is available to be drafted, he will be the number 1 overall pick. Emeka Egbuka should be one of the top 4 wide receivers drafted. He has all the wide receiver records at Ohio State, which is crazy to think because Marvin Harrison, Chris Olave, JSN, they all went there. But no, Emeka Egbuka has the wide receiver records, all catches. I believe he has yards at Ohio State. The running back duo this year at Ohio State was easily the best in the nation. They should be within the top 5 running backs drafted. Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. Judkins, a power runner. He's physical. He's more of a short yardage guy, and Travion Henderson, if you give him 3 yards of space, he's going to take it to the house. We saw that in the Texas game in the play before the first half ended. They were easily the best team, and I'm not going to lie to you. I was out on them after the Michigan loss. I thought they're going to crumble. Will Howard doesn't have the passing ability to utilize all of these weapons on the outside. He doesn't have the ability to utilize Travion and Quinshon as easily as he should. And in that first round matchup against Tennessee, I picked Tennessee because I thought Tennessee was more explosive offensively than Ohio State. I look stupid now, and immediately after that game, and all of my friends can back me on this, I was 100% in on Ohio State all the way. I knew they were not going to lose. In that game, they showed me Will Howard can sling it. He can utilize his weapons on the outside and in the slot and the weapons that are behind him. And he did throughout the rest of the run. And, I mean, for Ryan Day to have a run like that after a loss like that to Michigan is job-saving. When he loses that game to Michigan, as I said before, everybody's calling for his head. Everybody wants him to be fired. But when he's able to make that run to the championship game, my mind shifts, and my mind is now thinking, okay, so he responded to all of this adversity and all of this kind of backlash on social media, the press, whatever, with a run to the national championship. Like, that is perfect. That's job saving to me. I didn't think at first, when I initially saw the matchup, I didn't think he needed to win that game. I thought the run to the college football playoff championship is good enough. He now has his job secured. But the more I think about it, the more I think, going into the game, I believe they were over 10 point. They were double-digit favorites. You have already beaten what I thought was the second best team in Texas. If you lose to Notre Dame in the national championship, that again, I think, is worthy of him losing his job. And he didn't. Jeremiah Smith, deep pass down to the, you know what happened. The rest is history. I think that completely saved his job and earned him his, what did I say it was? His 7-year extension. 7-year extension. Past 2030. Yeah, that's a long time. So now I guess that's pretty much all I have to say about the college football season. I'm a Syracuse fan. Syracuse did really well. I'm going to get to some Syracuse guys in a minute because I'm going to talk about some Donnelly's dogs. I got some guys I like in this upcoming NFL draft. A couple of them are consensus, like a lot of the fans like them, a lot of the analysts like them, but a couple of them I was watching throughout the year, and I just think they're really, really good. So I guess we'll get into that. If we have like a Donnelly Dogs graphic, we can put it right here. Number one, I'm going with Jackson Dart from Ole Miss. Like I said before, I already talked about Ole Miss. Their team as a whole was disappointing to me, but throughout the year, he was not disappointing. Again, they had an 11-2 record. As I said, he threw for over 500 yards at Arkansas, and he wasn't even close to stopping there. He totaled over 12,000 yards of offense. When I look at him, I see a guy with a built frame, which is, that's a calling card for mobility, and he's very successful on the designed runs and scrambles. And I just see a true dual threat quarterback and just a tough leader. Like, throughout his career, earlier in his career and during high school, he's always had to lead the teams. He's always been that guy. He's always had expectations behind him. And to me, he's always met them. And that tells me that he's able to work through the pressure of being that guy on a football field. And that is someone I would want to draft. And I believe he will probably be the third quarterback taken. I don't think he'll be the second. I don't think he'll go before Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward, but I do think he will be the third quarterback taken, maybe in the late first round. It's hard for me to tell because I don't exactly know what team needs are, but I think he'll be the third quarterback taken, and I really like him as a prospect. And I have another quarterback. As I said, I'm a Syracuse guy. I watched Kyle McCord all year, and I really like him as a player. He's flying up the draft boards for a lot of analysts, and the report is for a lot of teams too. He threw for the most yards in college football this year, over 4,700. To me, at Syracuse, I was watching a pure pocket passer. Like, he can make the first read throws of all kinds. He can go behind the shoulder. He can go a little 5-yard out. But the one thing that stands out with him to me is that he looks down his first options way too long. And that's kind of what was his downfall in his game against Pitt. And for those of you that don't know, I certainly know. I went to the game. He had, I believe, he had 5 interceptions. He threw 5 interceptions, and I think he threw 3 pick sixes in the first half. It might have been 2, but I believe he threw 3 pick sixes in the first half. I was like, I believe, and even if I wasn't doing this podcast, I would have went back and watched. But I literally, on the way home, I was even thinking, what went wrong? Like, I don't understand how that happened. So I went back and watched, and that is his main negative, is that he's looking down these first options way too long, and he's not using his peripheral to make reads. He's watching. He's watching his first option, and then, he's open now. I'm going to throw it to him, and by the time, like, even in the ACC secondaries are good enough where they're always watching the eyes of the quarterback. They're always watching who he's looking at and preemptively guessing he's going to pass it here. And it really just didn't go well for him. But other than that, I think I watched him. He's comfortable stepping up in the pocket and making the throws downfield. And when you look at him, I initially thought he was shorter than he actually is. He's 6'3", and 6'3", he has a high, super quick release too. And he was just the leader of the Syracuse football team with 100% without a doubt. Again, he threw for the most yards in college football. He would, over 300 yards for him was easy money. I mean, it was almost guaranteed every single game. And the end of the season win against Miami too, he absolutely put on a show. It was amazing. So those are probably my 2 favorite quarterbacks. I got 2 wide receivers, 2 running backs, and 2 tight ends as well. So my first wide receiver is the Texas wide receiver Matthew Golden. Matthew Golden coming into the season was kind of overshadowed by his guy on the outside, Isaiah Bond. With Bond being, I believe, an Alabama transfer, he had the big name, he had the big school reputation coming in, and Bond never really found his footing. He had a couple of good games in the beginning half of the year, and he was sporadically good in there, like good here and there. But Matthew Golden, during the second half of the year, really carried the Texas receiving offense. He had almost 1,000 yards receiving. And what's specific I like about Matthew Golden, I watched him in big games as well towards the end of the season, but also throughout the season, he was able to make big, good catches over big, tall defenders. He was able to high point and jump over them. He's also really fast, not as fast as Isaiah Bond, but he should have a good quality 40 time. The unfortunate thing about him is, and this actually is not very pleasant in the eyes of NFL scouts, he has decent route running, but it can tend to get sloppy as the game goes on, where if you aren't running good enough routes, it's hard to get the separation that you should have to be able to make these catches. And I think that's why sometimes he would make the spectacular catches, and I'd say, oh, wow, he made that catch one-handed, or he made that jumping over a guy. Like, he shouldn't have had to do that because he should have been able to create separation in the first place due to his kind of hard cuts and good quality route running that sometimes just isn't there and isn't really consistent throughout the course of a game. Somebody else that Syracuse played this year, Stanford, has a wide receiver, 6'2", 210, from Medicine Hat, Alberta in Canada. Elic Iomanner is a crossing and vertical route master. He basically carried the Stanford receiving offense this year. Stanford was not very good, so they did not have a good record. But this year, I believe he only had over 600 receiving yards, which isn't eye-popping, but the year before, he received for over 1,100 yards. And that includes a nearly 300 receiving yard game. This is 2 years ago, not last year, because Stanford wasn't very good last year. 2 years ago, he had almost over a 300 receiving yard game against the Golden Boy, Travis Hunter, and the Colorado Buffaloes. He absolutely lit them up. He torched them. I watched the tape. He was on fire. He just couldn't be stopped. And there were times this year as well where I was watching him because he's in the ACC. Syracuse is in the ACC. He could not be stopped. He is physical. He is tough. He has the 10 to 15 to 20 yard routes just absolutely mastered. He's an animal at those. He lit it up 2 years ago. This year's numbers aren't eye-popping, but he's just a true athlete. Like, he is able to make catches over guys. He's able to be physical with you. Again, he's 6'2", 210. He has a great frame for a wide receiver. I believe he's the 7th or 8th ranked wide receiver on some guys' boards. And I know it gets tricky. There's wide receivers above him. Tet McMillan is awesome. Obviously, I talked about Bond and Golden. Luther Burden is an animal. But Elic Iomanner has the build to be a low-tier wide receiver 1, a great wide receiver 2 in the league. So there's a couple of running backs, too, that really intrigue me. And I prefaced with this on Afterthought Sports, too, also. That's on YouTube if you want to go watch it. I did a little segment here with my boys Ryan and Noah. We all know Ashton Jeanty is RB1, and that's fine. He had just an insane year, historic numbers, everything that comes along with it. He's an absolute animal. He can run through guys, run past guys. But Omarion Hampton is so unbelievably undervalued and underrated because of how everybody is on Ashton Jeanty. Omarion Hampton, the North Carolina Tar Heel, is a North Carolina guy. He went to high school in North Carolina. He's had 2 awesome seasons for North Carolina. He's able to run inside the numbers. He can be a power back when he wants. He's able to run outside the numbers. I watched the tape on him. I can physically see him transferring the weight and setting guys up for cuts. And all it takes is one step for him to go the other way, and he's 15 yards down the field. He's 15 yards down the field because he doesn't really have that last gear that a lot of people got, a lot of guys do. He doesn't have absolutely blazing speed. Like, a really fast DB will be able to catch up to him. But if you can make that one guy miss at the line or within 3 yards of the line, he has 15 yards easily. Also, he powerfully falls down. He gets like 3 or 4 yards on the fall down, never goes down easy. He should be the second running back taken if Ashton Jeanty was not in the draft. So many more people would be talking about him. He's an absolute freak. And then that brings me to Travion Henderson out of Ohio State. I already talked about Travion Henderson earlier, but I'm also in love with Travion Henderson as much as I am Omarion Hampton and somebody like Io Manor as well. Travion Henderson has. I said Omarion Hampton doesn't have the breakaway speed. That's exactly what Travion Henderson does have. Travion Henderson has insane speed and explosiveness. I said before he was one head of the two-headed monster at Ohio State in that backfield. Travion Henderson is unbelievable. He can run the ball. If he gets 3 yards open field, he's gone. Again, like I said before, we saw it in that Texas game. But the kind of one thing about Travion Henderson that I'm seeing and that I watched in tape is that his pass blocking game is not fully developed as to where it should be for a rookie. And yes, I see that point, but I also saw it in tape with Omarion Hampton too. Like I don't think there's a rookie coming into the league from college that has a fully developed pass blocking technique or pass blocking game. And if you want to see a great pass block from Travion Henderson, watch the Jeremiah Smith play in the national championship game. Where is Jeremiah? Where is Travion Henderson? Travion Henderson lays a nasty block that gives Will Howard a half second longer to steal the national championship. Like the catch and throw by Howard and Smith were just as important as the Travion Henderson block that gave them another half second to make that play happen. That was, if you have any questions about his pass blocking at all, it was just a perfectly formed, perfect, crystal clean block that was on the biggest college football stage you can think of. So, I also have a couple awesome tight ends. We know about Tyler Warren. I'm gonna briefly go over him. Tyler Warren is a wild card. He threw the ball, he passed the ball, caught the ball, ran the ball. He did everything for the Penn State offense. He just carried the entire thing. And let me be clear, I am a Drew Aller fan. I didn't think his season ended as well as it should have, obviously, and he'd probably agree with me. But Tyler Warren was the offense. We know how awesome he is. There's a lot of other good tight ends as well. Gunnar Helm, Fanning from Bowling Green, Colston Loveland. But the second tight end that I really like, again, I'm a Syracuse guy, but Oronde Gadsden for Syracuse, Oronde Gadsden the second, had an awesome year. He's more of a receiving tight end because he was a former wide receiver at Syracuse. And they were like, hey, buddy, you're like 6'3", have the build of a tight end. Why don't you just start playing tight end? And so last year he moved to tight end, and he broke receiving records at tight end for the tight end position at Syracuse. He's an awesome pass catcher, has insane athleticism. I saw it every year. I saw it every game. He was really kind of Kyle McCord's safety valve, if I were to say that, other than LaQuinn Allen. He was Kyle McCord's safety valve. And the one main thing about him is kind of like Travion Henderson, the pass blocking. Because he moved from wide receiver to tight end, he doesn't have completely a fully developed pass blocking game. So yes, that is a difficulty, but Trey McBride. I had Trey McBride on my fantasy team this year, and I don't think I ever saw him line up on the line. He was always in the slot. He's just a big wide receiver, and I don't see a reason why Oronde Gadsden can't be that as well. He's just an insanely athletic guy from Syracuse, and I think he could be a top 5 tight end taken in the draft. I know there are a lot of great tight ends, but I think he could be a top 5 tight end taken in the draft. I also have a couple questions to kind of stimulate stuff in the comments. If you guys want to answer, if you don't, that's fine. I am genuinely wondering. I have my own answer, but I am wondering the number of QBs that will be taken in the first round. Will it be 2 or 3? I don't think it'll be 4. I think it could be 2 or it could be 3, which is basically the question: does Jackson Dart go in the first round? Again, in terms of team needs of teams that draft in the first round, I'm not sure. But if I were to go strictly off, is Jackson Dart first round talent? I would say yes. I would say he should go in the first round. Obviously, he won't go, as I've said before, he won't go in front of Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward. But he should go in the first round. I believe he's first round talent. And if he doesn't go in the first round, I still don't waver from that opinion. And I'm also wondering, this is even trickier for me. I don't think I'd be able to come up with a definitive answer. I'm curious as to how many running backs will go in the first round too. This running back class is absolutely loaded. I just talked before. Travion Henderson out of Ohio State, along with his teammate Quinshon Judkins. Ashton Jeanty had a historic year. Omarion Hampton, obviously, I mentioned from North Carolina, and there's so many other awesome running backs who could easily go as well. So I really don't know how many running backs will go in the first round, and I'm very curious as to see if anybody watches what you think, because as I said before, it also has to do in terms of team needs as well. Some teams, like, I don't know, let's say the Cowboys, I know that for a fact, would like to take a running back, and they probably will take Ashton Jeanty is the talk around the Cowboy organization. So after that, who will take Omarion Hampton? Who will take Henderson, Judkins? Like, you know what I'm saying? It gets really tricky with that. So I don't know how long this turned out to be, but that's pretty much all I have for today. It's kind of a shorter episode because it's my first, but and it's not a super eventful time. I mean, there's combine coming up and the NFL draft soon. Within my next couple episodes, I'll have Ryan Adio from Field Goals and Forecast join me, because he knows more about kind of the NFL team needs than I do, and so we can kind of collab there and bring our big boards together ahead of the draft. But this is very exciting. I'm very excited to see where this will go. Last year, I think, was one of the best years in college football that I've watched. I'd love to know what you guys think. But yeah, I mean, that's about it. Be on the lookout for new episodes soon, within the next 2 weeks, because there's a lot, as I said, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of combine stuff. I know earlier today, last night, news came out that Abdul Carter, potential number 1 overall pick, the best defensive end, probably the best player in the draft, had I think it was stress fracture, or they might have called it like a stress reaction, something like that. And if you're not following me on Twitter, you should. It's at Nate5644. But I tweeted it out. I tweeted something out, and it was along the lines of, we all know Abdul Carter was playing with the shoulder injury during the CFP, at least. It might have been before. But with the shoulder injury, even during the CFP, he was still the best defensive end on the field, arguably the best defender. Like, I like to think, personally, this foot thing won't affect him or won't tank his stock whatsoever. But I really don't know, because on the other end of the spectrum, these guys who are drafting and researching and finding out every single thing about these prospects, everything matters. Like, every single thing. You are not only drafting the football skills of the player. I mean, you have to look into what brand of toothpaste they use in the morning. Do they use Crest, Colgate, Arm & Hammer? Like, every single thing matters. So in terms of Abdul Carter, I like to think personally he's that good of a player where it won't matter, and it's just a little foot thing. He'll be out for a couple weeks. But the reality of the situation is I think everything matters, and he might drop as a result of this. I wouldn't be shocked about it. So yeah, with that being said, I believe that's all I have for today. Again, look out for new episodes, stuff like that. And this was Nathan Donnelly's first episode of Saturdays Sound Better, and we'll see you later.